Last two I just did, and so this was the nominal cost of a year's tuition fees for UC, and divide that by CPI times 100 for the base year. We get 4,696, and then 14,100 divided by its CPI times 100 over here, you get 5,514. So these are the real cost of UC education using base year prices. And so now these are a fair comparison. These are not a fair comparison because, again, when you spent these dollars in 2019, they're a lot lower purchasing power than they were back in 79. So take out the inflation, we now have these numbers here. And you can see that the cost of UC education has pretty much increased by 5 times from what it was back in 1979, even when it's back in 1990. What really happened in the 2000s is when the cost of UC education went up quite a bit. And so we could use 2019 as a comparison year. I could use 1979. I could use any year, but one common method is to pick the base year as the comparison year. You don't have to do that. It really is based on who is creating the table and how they want to show the data. Here's a little thing I came across as to why the UC cost has gone up. And here we have the increase in the number of administrators. Going back to 2000, this is exactly when we saw the cost of UC education started to go up dramatically. And maybe the result of that is that we're paying, or students are paying for more administrators. So faculty, these are full-time tenure track or tenure faculty, and they were about, maybe 7,000 there, and now they've gone up to about maybe a little less than 9,000. While the administration's gone up from, I don't know, maybe 4.5 thousand, 4,500 to now 10,000. So we've doubled the amount of administrators, where we've increased the faculty slightly. And if you know anything about higher education, administrators are paid a lot more than faculty are, and each administrator comes with at least 1 or 2, maybe 3 staff people as well. And they also usually get a cart to drive on campus, if you've seen that at Chaffey College or other campuses. So most of the increase in money being paid by students is not going to faculty, it's going toward administrators, and I'm not sure what they all do. So that was using the real value equation. So far we've had the equation to create the CPI, we had the inflation rate equation, and then we had the real value equation, and there'll be one more equation by the time we're done. The topic is over the problems with the CPI, like we did with GDP and like we did with unemployment rates. And so there's been a lot of study done in terms of the problem with inflation, the measurement. And this all can be traced back to maybe 1995. A commission was set up to look into this. And this commission did a little study, and they felt that the CPI was overstating inflation by about 1.5 percentage points per year. So that means that they say inflation is, say, 2%. 1.5 percentage points means it's actually 0.5%, which is a big difference. Advisory committee known as the Boston Committee was set up in 1995 by the Senate Finance Committee, reported the CPI overstates inflation by maybe 0.8 to 1.6 percentage points, which has a big impact on the economy because a lot of things are indexed to inflation. And so if the CPI says inflation is this much, now it could cause people to pay more for contracts, people to pay more for labor agreements, people to pay more, or the taxpayers to pay more for Social Security benefits. Because Social Security benefits are indexed for inflation, and so they go up each year by what inflation was for the previous year. And if the CPI is overstating inflation, then that means the taxpayers are paying more than they should for Social Security benefits. So what are the problems with the CPI? Well, first, quality changes. We talked about this with GDP. Many times when the price of a good or service increases, there's also an increase in quality. So many times the price of a good or service decreases with a decrease in quality as well. This is known as hedonic quality adjustment methods. Market prices of several goods and services are altered to reflect quality changes. For example, if the price of a cell phone increased, say, 10%, but the quality is measured to have increased by 8%, then the cell phone price is said to increase by maybe 2%. which is a good way of doing that. The problem is this is not done on very many goods. There's quite a few goods where the quality improvements are not adjusted at all. They do this mostly on computer products, but things like regular items we buy, appliances, air conditioners, automobiles, houses, are all built better than they were in the past. They're much more energy efficient. Houses are better insulated, better plumbing, better wiring, much more convenient for people to use. And so, but the CPI does not have any kind of a little adjustment. And maybe, yeah, you're paying more for a house, but you're also getting a much better product. And so quality problems is really hard to address because, again, how do you measure the quality of these items? That's really subjective. Second, what happens is that it takes time to get these items into the market basket of goods. And if you know anything about new products, when they first come out, they're really quite expensive many times, and then they drop in price pretty fast. Well, the problem here is that the CPI doesn't pick up that decrease in price. They tend to be put in to the CPI market basket when these new items have already gone down in price. So, for example, snowblowers, which is not a big item in Southern California, unless you live in the mountains, but they came out in the 1950s, but they were not put into the CPI until 1978. And so back east, these are really very valuable items to buy. And I'm sure when they first came out, they're very expensive. After they learned to manufacture them and much more efficiently, the price can get down. But the CPI did not factor in that decrease in price, because they put it in much later after it's been out there for a long time. Cell phones are not part of the CPI until 1998. They first came out in 1990. Very expensive when they first came out, and they could not do very much. Your phone today is like a billion times better than the phones back in, say, 1990. But that decrease in price from, say, 1990 to 98 was not factored in the CPI. So again, by not including new products into the CPI when they first appear on the market tends to overstate inflation, because new products tend to fall in price after they are first marketed. These lower prices aren't recognized by the CPI because these products are not part of the CPI until after the prices have stabilized. Third problem is probably the most relevant, has probably the biggest impact. And this is known as a substitution bias. I like to say it is, the way I like to put it is that the CPI, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, does not understand the law of demand. They assume that consumers don't react to price changes. So if the price goes up, they don't understand that quantity demand goes down. We buy less. They assume we keep buying the same amount. Therefore, they don't understand that we're not paying that higher price and keep buying the same amount of some item. We've actually gone and found some substitute. For example, if the price of beef goes up, we can buy what? Well, we can buy chicken, we can buy soy products, we can buy fish, we can buy pork. We have a lot of choices out there. And so we don't keep buying the same amount of beef if the price of beef goes up, say 10, 20, 30%. They believe this has a bias of about 0.4 percentage points. So the CPI says inflation is 2%. The real inflation is maybe 1.6%. And so if we index Social Security benefits for 2%, that is billions of dollars we're out there paying when it should be 1.6%. Now, one way to do this is to change the market basket each year and then chain them together like we've been chaining things like the GDP deflator together. This has been quite controversial because if we do this, this would lower the inflation rate by maybe going from 2 to 1.6%. And the senior citizens don't like that because they understand this would lower their Social Security benefits. And so they've been fighting going toward a chain method for the CPI for a long time. They like it the way it is because they like it to overemphasize the inflation, because that means more dollars are going to be paid to them each month for their Social Security benefits. So sometimes politics does get into economics. Okay, now let's go look at the effects of inflation. And I'll start this here and then I continue in the next lecture. First of all, everyone is not hurt by inflation. If you're paying more prices to the grocery store, then the grocery store is receiving higher prices. And so it's not it's not a situation where everyone is a loser. There are some winners and there are some losers in inflation. Inflation has some negative macroeconomic effects across the entire economy, but I like to look at inflation as really a game here. That based on how you react to inflation, you can be a winner or you can be a loser. Sometimes you cannot avoid that, but sometimes you can. So again, if buyers are paying more for goods and services, that must mean what? That must mean the sellers are getting more as well. Someone's loss of paying more is offset by someone else's gain of receiving more. And what really matters is that you want to keep up with inflation. So over time, wages and salaries do tend to increase over time, which is what you want. If you have inflation, you want your nominal pay to go up because that keeps your situation the same, at least in real terms. And so when I'll come back, before I leave and come back later, let me just look at the graph here. This looks at the minimum wage going back to 1940. This up here is a nominal wage going up. Nominal wage is not indexed for inflation. It has to be changed each time by an act of Congress. This is what it could buy. So going back to 1968 or so, it could buy about $11 in today's money. What is the actual federal minimum wage? And this is the federal one. It's actually $7.25 today. So back in 1968, it was $11. So about a little over $3, $3.75 more than what it could buy back in 1968 compared to what it can buy in 2018. I think is when this came out. So the minimum wage has not kept up with inflation, and so in real terms, the value of the minimum wage has come down like this from late 60s to now, even though the nominal wage has gone up. What happened is that the nominal wage has not gone up as fast as inflation. They've increased it at a lower rate than the rate of inflation. And this is a case where there's a loser, and the loser is the minimum wage worker that's paid at the federal amount. And if you don't know that, in California wage is higher, and about half the states do have a higher minimum wage than the federal government does. But if states don't have a minimum wage, then the federal one is the one that is applied to those states, and about half the other states don't have a federal minimum wage. They don't have a state minimum wage, and therefore they use the federal one of $7.25 an hour.